So I replied, "Of course I can share some knowledge. If you want, I will hold a 1 hour-long presentation about network communication, about DNS servers, routers, IP addresses, gateways, and so on." She was a little bit shocked due to those terms, because she probably never heard them, but that was my prime intention, namely to scare her a little bit, to be a little troll. And she knew what game I was playing, since she only looked at me with an ironical gaze. "But then visit me later in the evening, so that I can sleep better." "Touché," I receded, while considering a more serious answer. But disregarding the super specific terms of computer relationships, I could prepare some information on biology, for it is a subject that arouses interest for basically everyone. There are so many topics that everyone is enthused by something. "That sounds way better," she laughed as a consequence, as our topics of the breaking news were brought to an end. Ad hoc we had nothing more to talk about, but I bypassed that with an ache in my thigh. After all, we were still sitting in the same pose like before. I sat on the chair, and at the same time I was Chloe's chair. So next I appealed to her whether she could stand up, for me to recuperate my hip joint. "Chloe, could you please let me raise myself? Those chairs are so uncomfortable, like sleeping on a bed without a mattress." I comprehend that. Not the first time someone says that. "Really?" She stood up ultimately and explained her theory. "Have you ever seen someone of the staff taking a seat here?" "Yes, once Jessica, corresponding to the circumstance. But let's take Dr. Bush for example. He is someone who is not young anymore, and without any accusations or insults, he probably likes to sit." "Could be, yeah. But at least they look acceptable, don't you think?" "Yeah, that is certainly their only purpose. They're so hard, so coarse. No, I'm not daring that again. Rather, I'll take a seat on my bed." "And you could do that too, to preserve the past." Being fully capable of reading between the lines, I saw directly what kind of allusion was attached to that. So I walked to her side and only thought about the Spanish version of the number 1. Because exactly that was the consensus floating between us. The card set was already prepared on her bedside table, preserved and cared for, as if it was a treasure. It was fast made clear how much she appreciated that, because it was one of a handful of things placed there. Among the others was Frankie, whom I saw only later when she grabbed the red box. Honestly, as I saw that 2/5 of things that laid ready were for me, the first thing urging into my mind was giving her a massive hug. But I was certain that we had plenty of time for that later on, so I took the cards out of the container and started shuffling. Luckily, I had nothing to worry about regarding school, so I could just let time flow like usually, without setting reminders or something like that. Because without such, I had forgotten whatever it was, like everything else that magically vanished for a couple of hours. When those had passed by, reality returned again, and I found myself within the room we met. Not long ago, I was namely still situated in that wonderland, where only 3 things existed: Chloe, me, and Juno. But as we returned, concluding with a victory of mine, we switched topics. When one is finished, something else starts, and according to that, it was nowhere near the end of my visit. Fortunately, my pretended stay at a friend's house implied that I remained there for several hours, so I had no urge to consider time, and therefore just continued passing it with Chloe. Afterwards followed the concluding scenario, which consisted of laying in each other's arms, like it had become usual after our card game sessions. Though we had contact right away when we encountered again, it turned out to be a little more comfortable compared to the chair from before. By the way, speaking of uncomfortable when she was next to me, disregarding the pose was just an untruth. The one and only disturbance in the now moment represented the door, which made clear that someone was entering. Since I didn't know who it was, we placed ourselves on the bed in a more usual position. We did it partly due to habit, and partly because we wanted to keep any sort of intimacy for us only. Although we didn't mention that directly toward one another, we were somehow in unison in terms of that. The only person that saw us together like that was Jessica, but she didn't show up even once. If I had not seen her a priori, I would have believed she had a day off. But the way it was made clear that I better cut the lines to her and stop thinking about the why or reasons in general that transformed her into a socially awkward person that could compete with my past self. Rather, I focused on Chloe, who was faithful in that sense. That was better for all involved, I concluded. So I was prompted to say that we kind of maintained a top-secret relationship. A relationship that would be continued when I left, with means I had prepared but not yet revealed. Actually, I didn't see the occasion yet to hand my present to her. At first, we talked about Jessica and that stuff. Then we played Uno. And then we laid in each other's arms. So how was I supposed to take the initiative? Related to that question, I simply chose to interrupt the goodbye phase later, just to catch up with that. When we passed our final minutes together after the visitor, who turned out to be a nurse searching for the room in which an alarm occurred, we returned to the topic of school once more, while she wished me good luck and insisted on me teaching her some biology, which I couldn't turn down. Further, she appealed to me that I brought another game with me the next time I came. On my side, I rang for words as to how I could give it to her, if it was still working after all. I mean, it was placed inside my pocket all the time, during all the movements I made. After all, I decided on doing it strangely straightforward, as I like to call that strategy. After we have raised ourselves out of the bed, I walked to the window and pretended to look outside. But in truth, I pulled the phone out of my pocket, just to see if it was indeed working. And since it did, I could proceed to step 2 of my plan, alluding to my intention. I turned around, while holding my hands on my back, and attracted her attention onto me, by saying, "Hey, there's something else on my mind." Attentively she came into my direction, and asked what it was. I responded calmly, "Well, you remember that I spoke with you about staying in touch, right?" After a little pause, she replied, "Yeah. Have you gained information on how that works? Maybe they can install that into this room." Having anticipated that, I lunged out for my last step, handing it to her. "I have not really, no." I interrupted my speech to make it a little bit more exciting, as I saw that it made absolutely no sense to her. Since why would I mention something that had no reason to be mentioned? Ultimately, she almost seemed disappointed due to my statement, so last but not least, I resolved her suffering for a plausible answer by telling her it wouldn't be necessary anymore. Then I appealed to her to stretch out her hands and to close her eyes. Admittedly, I pressured a little bit, so that she had not too much time to expose me. Within seconds, I swung my hands forth and laid the little device into hers. "You can look now," I invited her to investigate, while I built up a distance to observe neutrally. As it turned out, she just kept on standing there, just like someone does who gets a shock or a surprise. The first moments when you're not able to do anything because your system is inhibited by the matter causing it. Quite common that occurs after an accident due to the lack of realization. And since Chloe was simply staring at the little phone, I could tell what the matter causing it was. To be honest, I didn't expect something bad to happen, so I just kept on looking forward to her hopefully soon occurring reaction. I mean, everyone likes it when you help them catching up with something they see themselves disadvantaged with. And exactly that was the case for me, for us, even though it was not my only motive. I was driven by so many factors, by far not only out of the need to help someone, considering at the same time that she was already beyond the term someone, and that implied a more intimate occasion. Intimacy in return was not the only motive I was prompted by either. But the climax can be continued for ages, with probably only one result at the end. Love. A sensation that makes you do things for specific people, out of reasons you have no explanation for. Though exactly that is the clue. You don't understand it like a language, you rather perceive it like a feeling. But be that as it may, in the situation I was still looking at Chloe and waited for something to happen. I became aroused, because it was like she was situated inside a loop. Out of an impulse, I approached therefore. "Chloe, what do you think of it?" She continued for a couple of seconds, before she turned toward me and responded somehow disturbed. "Aaron, on which date is your last exam on?" Due to the fact, according to which she seemed to be within some sort of inner conflict, I first hesitated to reply. She had wrinkles on her forehead, tears in her eyes, a distorted position of her mouth, and her head pressed onto her torso. When I saw all that in coherence, I immediately rectified my initial perception of her, when I evaluated her as totally aghast. And as a consequence, it was made clear to me that I apparently triggered something inside her I didn't make acquaintance with until then. Something latent I only noticed the predecessor of, so to say. When she approached me in that one night, I might have seen exactly that, provided that I had the necessary light. But now I saw it, and it affected me to my core, as it shattered my entire enthusiasm at once. Remaining was subsequently only a mental void. The positivity was taken away from me so rapidly that not even the negative matters could fill in the vacuum. And so I found myself in a neutral emptiness, in which I recalled the question she had asked me, to which I responded quietly. I don't know it by heart, but I assume in the beginning of November, when computer science takes place, which is the last one to pass. Why do you ask? Meanwhile, she had returned to her bed and kind of holed up under the blanket. Because... Do you have something up on that day? Otherwise, you could visit me so that we can talk. You could also teach me biology if you want. For now, I just want you to focus on those upcoming exams, because they are very important for your further path. And in terms of those, I wish you all the luck in this world.